Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar book review. This is going to be for Beasts of the Four Nations, Creatures from Avatar The Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra. So, long name here for a book that's been incoming for a very, very long time. We've been talking about Beasts of the Four Nations since the day it was originally announced / revealed to us, and that was like May 2021. We've been waiting for this book for over 4 years, and throughout all that time it's been delayed multiple times. It was effectively kind of cancelled awaiting re-announcement, and then just a bunch of months ago it finally was re-announced, and as of today, September 23rd, it is out. Technically tomorrow, Wednesday the 24th, for comic book stores, but in essence it is out now. Formats it's available in is, of course, you can get it digitally if you want. I'm right now going off the digital version of the book. My physical copy, the deluxe edition, is not arriving until probably Thursday or Friday. I'll do a separate video going over the deluxe set, the completion of the overall deluxe group of books when that happens. So this one is literally just about the contents of the book. So like I said, it's out digitally, standard hardcover, $40 for just the hardcover book on its own, and then it's $80 if you want Beasts of the Four Nations Deluxe Edition, which of course is part of the set with the Avatar and the 4 Korra art books to make the combined spine images and other kind of fancy bits and pieces that are going on. So, straight away, what is this book? If you happen to have never heard about this book in all the time, what is Beasts of the Four Nations? As the title would imply, it is a hardcover book about the animals of the Avatar world. Specifically, they describe it officially, Dark Horse describe it as a kind of combination art book and lore book. So it is both. There's a lot of art of the animals in this book, but also there is text about each of the animals. To a certain degree, it's done in a little bit of an encyclopedia style, though there's a little bit of kind of a caveat to that with regards to how it's exactly kind of laid out. It is not trying to be a completely comprehensive list of all animals in Avatar, in that it doesn't feature all the animals that we know about. Obviously, it's in the title, it's Creatures from Avatar and Korra. It's only meant to be the ones that appear in those two series. It's not even featuring like the comics necessarily, though it kind of pulls like a little bit here and there from that. The book is 128 pages, which might be a bit of a surprise just because this makes it the shortest of the hardcover books by a decent margin. Though I suppose the Korra Book 1 art book isn't that longer than it, but still, it's on the kind of shorter ends of these books. But considering how much art is in here, you know, it kind of makes sense to a certain degree. So that's the core of kind of what it is. I'll describe more details about the exact structure of how it does the text and stuff like that in just a moment. First of all, overall thoughts. I think when this book was first announced, and for many years, this was a book where it just felt like when this finally comes out, this should be a home run, slam dunk, it realistically should be 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 across the board. There should be no real reasons this book doesn't just absolutely nail it, because everyone loves the animals of Avatar. Just fill a book with a ton of really nice art on the animals, and also fill it up with stuff we don't know about the animals previously, and you basically have everything you want from a book like this. And unfortunately, to a certain degree, they've only kind of, I think, partially succeeded. On the art book side of things, it's like, for the most part, you know, they get it right. All the art is nice, though there is a caveat to that as well. The problem I have with this book is just that I don't think the text of this book, the information about the animals, is quite up to the standard I want and the standard I expect from these Dark Horse hardcover books. Because I think, unfortunately, in terms of like, they make this they attempt to make this an in-universe Avatar book. That Beast of the Four Nations is effectively a journal written by Aang, donated to a library in the Earth Kingdom, and that's how kind of we sort of have possession of this book to read it. And that decision drastically affects, one, the text of the book, but it also affects the art, in that because they've really gone in for it's an in-universe artifact, all the pages are done like journal entries and stuff like that. And so quite a lot of the art in the book is just in kind of black and white. It's kind of like black sketches on the journal pages of this book. Just to kind of showcase this a little bit, you can see this in some of the kind of preview pages with the way they do it here. You can see this sort of scroll texture, and most of the art as you kind of go through it here, you can see is in the kind of black and white kind of style. There are pages where it is full color, obviously, but most of the art in the book is this kind of black and white kind of on the journal type stuff. And that is entirely because this book is attempting to be this journal written by Aang about the animals. And it's kind of crazy that they made that decision in one of these big fancy hardcover books, that they go that far as to affect like more than half the art in the book. I didn't count every single piece of art, but most of the art in the book is that. And I think it's just a little bit unfortunate, and I don't think it's wrong to just have the expectations that in one of these big, expensive, hardcover Dark Horse books, that it's all full color. I don't mind, like, a few pieces of art being done in kind of black and white to get a certain effect across. But when a lot of the sort of almost uniqueness of some of the animals is, in a way, the color, it feels so crazy to take out a whole visual element of the animals just to do it in that style, just for going for the in-universe kind of style effect. And I want to be clear, the effect on the art is kind of, I would say, somewhat minimal, though notable, compared to the effect on the actual text. Straight away, I think you can probably already tell what the problem is when it comes to, like, wait, why is Aang writing a encyclopedia journal type thing about the animals? Why him? And then again, the title of the book literally says the animals of Avatar and Korra. Why is Aang the one writing this? Why isn't this written by someone in the Korra era? So at least you can properly reflect on everything beforehand. This book probably, if you're committing to the in-universe stuff, probably should have been written by some sort of a, I don't know, zoologist or something like that within the Avatar world. So it can just be a pretty straightforward, boom, information on the animals. You don't need to worry about the kind of characterization necessarily. It's just about the animals. But instead, because it's Aang writing the journal, I think it leans into referencing the episodes where we see specific animals in a little bit too much. And it does feel like there is a huge inconsistency across a lot of the entries for specific animals in the book, where it feels like if Aang is kind of familiar with the animal, it almost feels like there may be some of the weaker entries, because you know he's just going to talk about, oh, here's how I went about riding this animal and stuff like that. Whereas if it is an animal he's not super familiar with, it feels like, oh, that's a little bit better because he's actually going to talk a bit about the behavior of the animal and other aspects, because he hasn't the direct experience with that animal. And it is so unfortunate that some of the entries just get to that point where you're like, there's nothing here. Like, why am I reading this? Why is there multiple paragraphs about this animal, this thing, when that's all you have to say? I think the worst example in the whole book is from one of the preview pages. It is the pages about the dragon here. Now, there is a full double page spread of a really nice color piece of art of the dragons after this within the book. These aren't the only pages on the dragons, but the text here is just not great. He basically refuses to really talk about the dragons because it's meant to be a secret that he met the dragons, and he has to keep the dragons secret. So he's not really telling things, but he basically is saying what happened here. And it's just a gimmick, I think, taken way too far. Dragons is probably right up there in terms of one of the most hyped entries that I think most fans would want out of this book, to see what the book has to say about dragons, because there are a lot of mysteries about them, especially because they're not really around for the most part in the Aang era or even in the Korra era, though Druk's existence is very, very interesting. But no, it's entirely effectively about referencing the Firebending Masters. That's it. Nothing really else of particular substance. There's one kind of interesting bit where they do mention that like several avatars were lucky enough to have them as familiars, which is cool, but even then that's not inherently this book being new about that. We know Roku had one, and we know Avatar Zito had a dragon. Now that's a little bit more obscure, the whole Zito reference, because we only learned out about that in, I think, the Roku novel a few months back, like a year ago. But still, it's not this book really revealing anything new or of substance, and it just feels like, who approved this? Like, John O'Brien, show writer, wrote these entries, and he was okay with this. Approvals that this went through were okay with this, and it just feels like, yeah, this isn't really that great. And it is the same with, I think, a lot of the other ones, where it's not super interesting. Like, you can see there's an example of this one where like some of the animals do get these little inserts here from other characters. So Aang writes the main text, and then with a Croco Cat you can see the boulder, because he has a Croco Cat called the Pebble, gives a little bit of a sidebar on this specific character. Now this does continue throughout the book, where different characters give their thoughts on this, and thankfully the book does actually include Korra characters in these every so often. There's really not that many of them overall. I think Korra comments on two animals. It's the polar bear dog and the sand shark. Milo comments about ring-tailed lemurs, which is actually a kind of interesting one, because of course Aang doesn't... The Aang part of the ring-tailed lemur entry is that, as far as I'm aware, these animals are extinct. It's kind of so sad. And then Milo writes the entry of just like, no, they're around, Grandpa. I have one, and it's kind of fun. Bolin talks about like fire ferrets because he has Pabu, and Iki talks about sky bisons just to have a slightly different perspective. Sometimes they're interesting, sometimes they're a little bit like, okay, you were just referencing the episode. Like, I think unfortunately a lot of the Sokka entries are just a little bit like, I get it, you want to try and have some humor here, but like the book's not about that, in my opinion. Like, okay, like, you know, say like the Sabertooth Moose line entry is particularly frustrating because it feels like Aang says the same thing, and then Sokka's entry, because he had experience with this in Bitter Work, is effectively the same thing, but just Sokka freaking out about it. And it's just like, yeah, the adults are aggressive, the cubs are kind of cute, and it was just that kind of repeated over and over again. And it's the same with like a lot of the other ones. Like Toph says stuff about some of the animals, but there's not much to really say. Where like she has a comment on the ostrich horse page where it's basically just, I don't like the sound of their running, it's all clickety clack, they need to cut their claws. And it's like, okay. She comments on the serpent, because of course she was involved in that incident, but again, is it anything of interest about the serpent itself? Not really. And it kind of just feels like it's that kind of throughout the whole thing. Even something like, say, the aardvark sloth shows another one where it's way too referential. A somewhat interesting animal that the 2 paragraphs of text effectively just describe that apparently all this animal does is just lick that slime that the Sun Warriors use in their traps off things. And that's everything Aang knows about it. That's all you need to know about it. And it's just, that's it. Aardvark sloth, the slime animal. And that's it. And there's no other information. You'll of course notice it's not really done in any sort of a real fact file way, where there's no quote unquote technical information about the animals. Not that maybe you'd expect there to be. But it doesn't really go beyond like a certain basic level. Once or twice, it feels like when there's maybe nothing particularly to reference. The writing delves a little bit deeper into like the behavior of a specific animal, but there's not really all that much to say in so many cases about these things. Like even the one about the bear. Okay, yeah, of course, Anne comments about it. It's kind of weird that it's just a bear, but otherwise, all of the commentary is just Bosco wears clothes. Bosco is the representative of this, the regular bear, and that's it. King Kwei, of course, reiterates kind of the same stuff just from his perspective, knowing Bosco a little bit better. The polar bear dog one is kind of interesting because you do get the complete contrast here, where Aang talks about the polar bear dog as being like one of the most vicious animals in the entire world, feared by all. And then on the following page that's not in the previews here, Korra talks about how, whoa, Aang, that's not my experience at all. And it's kind of funny because she has to like reluctantly almost accept that, like, well, that's true, but Naga's actually nice. That's true, but Naga. And it's kind of funny in that regard. But I think the main point I would definitely say about this is just that, like, to me, the text is below par. Kind of well below par. I'm struggling with, like, you know, is it really bad? I don't think so. In terms of my first read through, I think it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be from just the preview pages. There is a bit more there than is just in the previews, because quite a few of the animals do have, like, say, an extra page that's not included in the previews about them. Not all of them, but some of them do, and it actually has a bit more going on, which I do appreciate. But is it my expectations? Like what sort of information do I expect this book to actually reveal about these animals? And is it reasonable for the book to just be filled with like more and more kind of new information and all this kind of crazy stuff? That's what I'm not entirely kind of sure about. In terms of, like, it's why I maybe hesitate to just really go in on them for this. But I do think the decision to make it like it's a book written by Aang, which kind of dates the book in a kind of weird way when it comes to, you have to create a bit of a construct for the core characters to talk about the animals, when I really think they should have just made it simpler for themselves by just having it be a new, I don't know, zoologist character or something like that. Just write all of the entries. He can, at times, acknowledge that most of the information on this animal comes from experiences certain characters had in certain episodes, but the book wouldn't, I feel like, get overly bogged down like it feels like parts of this book do, with just, okay, here's Zuko talking about the Zuko alone encounter with the turtle ducks, that of course the parents are protective and stuff like that. Okay, we got it. I watched the episode. Like I showed you already, the dragon stuff is basically, did you watch the Firebending Masters? Yeah, you know it's a secret. Great. Fantastic. And it's just kind of bits and pieces like that. Otherwise, like, I do want to also highlight this. I think this has happened a few too many times to Dark Horse recently, where there's these description errors where, like, this is live. I just got this up just before this video started, so this is new. There are no spirits in this book, even though the description of this book for years has said that it will have images and information on Avatar and Korra's creatures large and small, including many from the spirit world. There are no animals from the spirit world in this book at all. And I'm not sure what technicality they're trying to present here, really. There's just no spirits. Like, they don't go over any spirits in terms of the notable ones, the minor ones that are more animal-like. No, I'm pretty sure all the animals in this book are just animals we see in the physical world. There are no spirits. The book even clarifies when it gets to the page on the line turtle should not be really in any way considered a spirit. It is an animal. It lives a really long time. It's very spiritual, but it's a physical being. It's not a spirit. So there is a marketing flub completely that, to me, it obviously highlights there's one of the clear examples of like, how has the book changed from the initial plan in like, say, 2021 to now in 2025? Well, clearly they got rid of any inclination to do spirits in this book, like, at all. That just kind of completely came out of this book in its entirety. Because I still to this day have no clue what the actual production line on this book was. Clearly the cover was done, because we had the cover day one in the announcement back in like May 2021. But like, obviously we had no indication for those first couple of years if any other art for the interior of the book had been done or not. And in that, we only got preview pages with the kind of newer announcement like this year. So was everything except the cover on this book done in the last year or two? Or are there some pieces of art that were done from back in like 2021, 2022? I really want to know what happened. I'm guessing it's just one of those situations where it's just a victim of like the early days of Avatar Studios forming, where a few other things in the publishing space kind of slipped at this time as well, where we basically lost a Korra trilogy somewhere in the mix as well. This book basically got like kind of cancelled, shelved until a few years later. I really want to know what the full scope of what happened with this actually was, because the only excuse Dark Horse have is that in the initial announcement, even though it was up for years, pre-orders went up everywhere, they never had this particular page up. Their own website never listed this book until the kind of relaunch basically here. So that's that situation. In terms of kind of notable animals that are not included in the book, because like I said, it's not complete, I think, by any means, but even stuff that is in ATLA and Korra, they don't cover everything. So ones that I noted just off the top of my head, there's no Rabaru here, which I think is just a little bit weird. I think Rabaru is one of the more kind of standout animals. I'd say above at least 4 or 5 animals that they have in this book. I think Rabaru would have been actually much more interesting to see. And then cat deer. Now, admittedly, that's a bit of a different one where, like, okay, it's Juan's animal companion, Mula, like the cat deer. But still, it's an Avatar companion that we learned about in Korra. Korra could have given some insight into it. I think that's one that probably should have just been in here somewhere. I think it's really, really weird that it wasn't. Especially because in the Line Turtle entry, Aang basically relays all the information about beginnings effectively. That like he knows the history of like the Line Turtles helping humans living on their backs, giving them the elements to survive in the spirit wilds. Like Aang is directly referencing that in the text. So I don't really see how there should be a problem with like knowledge of certain things from Juan's era necessarily, because they've just been kind of, I think, rolling with the idea that it's a little bit more well known than you think. It's not as secretive as you maybe think it is. But anyway, they're the two obvious ones. With, you know, if you look at the full list of animals we have compared to what's in the book, there's probably some other stuff that they didn't cover as well, which is a little bit unfortunate. Anything else? Just some stats here, I suppose. By counting the listings in the index for the different animals, by my count, it's 55 animals that get covered in this book. There are 24 full-page, full-color images that aren't done in the kind of journal style. And that includes 4 double-page spreads that they give to the dragons, badger moles, sky bison, and the line turtle as like the last animals in the book. There are 29 separate kind of insert color images, and then every other image in the book is the black and white style on the journal. Like I said, the book overall is 128 pages, and then there are 4 pages of sort of like concept art process sketchbook at the back. It does feel very thrown in. Like it's not a full, in any way, full featured kind of extras section at the back of this book. It's just, hey, here's 4 of the full page pieces of art, and here's an earlier stage of them. And that's it, just 4 pages of that. That's all that there is there. And then I'll wrap it up with a bit of a I'm going to call it a spoiler section just in case you guys want to experience the full book yourself and read it all by yourself. But here are, for me, some of the more notable tidbits from throughout the book. I've already mentioned actually a few of them across the video, but like, I want to be clear here. Like, during my second read through this book, I had a document open and I noted anytime I felt there was a particularly, like, this is an actually interesting piece of information, I will note this down to mention in the video. So the first one I have here is just Aang talking about the ring-tailed lemur. So these are obviously the lemurs that we see in Korra's era, like Pokey is one of these. Aang, of course, thinks they're extinct. Milo gives the kind of insert that they're not. That was interesting just to see Aang kind of talking about them. One other point, maybe I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not during the video. The book specifically is written by 12-year-old Aang. He mentions in one of the kind of in-between sections in the books that he is 12 years old when he's writing this. Meaning, it has to be like, almost like I would say immediately or in the weeks following the end of the series, like immediately following Sozin's Comet, he has to do this because he's not 13 yet, so it basically has to be in the like 3 months, I guess, following the series that he puts this book about animals together. Again, weird choice to do that, but that's the way it is. Second one, on the page about Flopsy, King Boomy is the one who has the kind of insert text. And he actually mentions something that I don't remember ever hearing about before about Boomy and Flopsy, which is that Boomy got Flopsy as a gift when Flopsy was just a pup. There's no further details about how exactly that happened, but they obviously highlight the idea of this is another kind of almost Naga situation where, like, this is a really wild, vicious, dangerous animal. How on earth does Boomy have one that's relatively tame and friendly? Well, it's because he had it since it was a pup and it was a rare gift, I guess, given to him. So that's kind of interesting. On the Otter Penguin page, it is revealed by Katara, who gives the insert on this one, that penguin sledding is now a competitive sport in the Southern Water Tribe. Again, no further detail really about that, just that it's become a full-on sport, and apparently the otter penguins are actually particularly competitive when it comes to that. That's interesting. I think we basically knew this before, but for some people they might not have connected the dots on this, but that there are two types of turtle duck. One is aquatic, which is the one we see in like Zuko alone, but there is also a winged variant, one that actually has wings and can fly. It's migratory, and I think we see that in one of the Korra short stories. I think it's the one involving Milo. I think it's Lost Pets. I think you see the winged turtle duck in, but they highlight that is an aspect of turtle ducks here, is that there's variance with the two different types, which is kind of cool. On the page about the serpent of Serpent's Pass, I just thought it was a fun quote. Everyone who lives near these lakes knows someone whose uncle got eaten by the serpent. And it just seems like there are rumors about people honestly do get eaten by the serpent, which is just a fun detail. On the dragon page, several avatars were lucky enough to have them as familiars, which again is just referencing Roku, Zito, and I guess some other avatars as well, I'm guessing. Then it's basically just the line turtle stuff right at the back of the book. One, they do double down, not that it was really in doubt, but line turtles are animals, they are not spirits. Yes, they live for thousands of years, they are the oldest kind of physical beings, that sort of stuff. We do see Aang talk about beginnings era stuff, including mentioning the line turtles giving the elements to people, living on the backs and stuff like that. And then one thing I was actually really hoping that this book would go into, and it actually does, and that is that it sort of highlights for the first time in a long time that yes, humans hunted the line turtles to near extinction at some point, I guess, after Wan's era. And as far as Aang knows, there is only one left, the one that came to help him in Sozin's Comet. So that was a piece of information where, like, I was wondering, like, would they commit to that, continuing going forward? And it seems like they are. Now, admittedly, it is, like, from Aang's perspective, it's as far as Aang knows. They're still keeping it somewhat mysterious, but that is the situation there. So that's just something that's kind of worth noting overall. So they're my thoughts on the book overall. In terms of a recommendation, I still think the book is good enough that I would recommend people get it. Now, again, the buying decision is going to be a tricky one, just on the basis of, like, unless you have the other deluxe sets, you probably shouldn't really be getting the deluxe edition. Like, unless you really want to complete the set and have the big spine image kind of display with the 6 deluxe sets, it really feels like there's no particular reason to get the deluxe set. Though I will note that this is the deluxe set. This image with the cabbage merchant and the ostrich horses isn't in the book. So it is an exclusive lithograph for the deluxe set. That image, you only get that in the deluxe set. Again, I haven't got the deluxe set myself. I'm going to be getting it later in the week. I'll talk about that when it happens. But it does feel like it's one of those things where, like, if you want to spend the money on this, get it because you care about all the deluxe sets. Otherwise, you should be getting probably more the standard copy of the book, probably for the cheapest price you can. It's $40 by default, but you should be able to get it for a little bit cheaper, especially if you wait a little bit. And then it's like $20 for the digital copy of this, which is nice if you just want to quickly kind of skim through it and read it. In terms of, like, art, it's ultimately, like, pretty strong outside of the fact that, you know, it's a baffling decision to me that they made a decision with the whole journal thing that resulted in kind of half the art being in black and white, which is just a crazy decision in my mind. And then, yes, if you are mainly maybe here for information on the animals, I'm not sure there's actually that much, like, really new and interesting information. Even though it kind of comes across as like, oh, they're really leaning into the characters here. I don't even think the kind of character work of, like, oh, it's Aang writing the entries is that flavorful. It does feel like it's a constant struggle of, are we trying to be really characterful with Aang, constantly talk about riding animals and stuff like that, or is he just trying to talk about the animals? And it doesn't feel like a consistency was really found with that over the course of the whole book. And some entries just feel like the mark was missed completely. Other entries, it feels kind of okay, but they're the animals that are maybe the less interesting ones, where it kind of feels like, do you know what? That could be the entry for almost any monkey. The fact that it's about the hog monkey, I'm not sure feels like super specific. But then, like, to see something like the dragon entry just be so, it's a secret. It's just really annoying to me. So there's frustrations, I think, with this one. If I was to give it a score out of 10, I'm probably leaning towards, like, maybe 7.5, 8 at a stretch. But I do feel there are some things that keep this book from being as good as it could and should have been. And it's not just that I think I'm asking for the book to be something, like, completely different. It's just they made choices that forced them down a specific path, and kind of the fact that no one caught on to the fact that it would result in the book not being as good as it could have been is a bit of a problem to me. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Again, I'll be talking about the book more at some point further down the road, later this week, when my physical copy of the deluxe set comes in, and I can show you the book in physical kind of form and stuff like that, highlight the final deluxe set, show you all 6 of the books stacked side by side. But yeah, I think the main problem with this book is just that the art is top notch, but it's let down by the decision to make it an in-universe book. And the fact is, unfortunately, that I think the text comes across as being a little bit too close to the in-universe style text in, like, say, like the Avatar cookbook, or like something like Avatar Legacy, where these are books where you don't maybe expect them to have too much extra information because it's done by Inside Editions, not one of the big publishers. And I think the fact that one of the big hardcover books feels like it comes closer to being in this category than the publisher of the big art books or the main comics for the franchise is a bit of a telling point in my mind. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. If you've read the book already, what did you think in terms of art, the consistency of the art across the book? What are your thoughts on the text, the decision to make it an in-universe book? Just let me know everything about this now that this book is finally out. It's good, but it could have been brilliant, is what I'll say to finish this off. So thanks for listening, and bye.